Taxi Driver wasn't just a movie, it was born from madness and death. Paul Schrader wrote it while suicidal, living in his car with a bleeding ulcer. Robert De Niro got a taxi license and drove real passengers through streets piled with rotting garbage. The composer died hours after finishing his final note, and the most famous line,
"You talking to me?"
wasn't even in the script. Here are 15 weird and surprising facts about Taxi Driver. Fact 1.
Loneliness has followed me my whole life. Everywhere.
Paul Schrader didn't write Taxi Driver as a career move. He wrote it as therapy to keep himself alive. In the early 1970s, Schrader's life had fallen apart. He'd broken up with his wife, broken up with the woman he left his wife for, severed ties with his mentor, Pauline Kael, and lost his position at the American Film Institute. He was broke, depressed, and drinking heavily. For several weeks, Schrader lived in his car, driving around Los Angeles at night because he couldn't sleep. He'd stay in bed until 4 or 5 in the afternoon, then get up, grab a bottle, and wander the streets until morning. After the bars closed, he'd go to pornography theaters. This went on for 3 or 4 weeks, a self-destructive cycle that nearly killed him. He was saved by a stomach ulcer. The pain got so bad, he had to go to the hospital. While recovering, he realized he'd been living like a man in an iron coffin, floating through the city alone, despite being surrounded by people. That's when the taxi driver metaphor hit him. The script poured out in 15 days. Schrader later said it jumped from my mind almost intact. He wasn't writing for success or acclaim. He was writing to survive. Years later, Schrader admitted he couldn't distinguish between the pain in the work and the pain in his life. Taxi Driver was his suicide note that became a masterpiece instead.
Now
Fact
back
2.
to Gene Krupa's syncopated style shortly.
The haunting music you hear in Taxi Driver was composed by a man working on borrowed time. Bernard Herrmann, the legendary composer behind Psycho and Vertigo, was 65 years old and in failing health when Martin Scorsese hired him. It would be his final masterpiece. Herrmann was Scorsese's only choice for the composer. The director was a longtime admirer and considered Herrmann's score essential. He later said it supplied the psychological basis throughout. Herrmann was initially reluctant to work on such a violent film, but he eventually agreed and created one of the most evocative scores in cinema history. On December 23, 1975, Herrmann finished recording the final cues for Taxi Driver. That same day, he viewed the rough cut of his next assignment, God Told Me To, and had dinner with that film's director, Larry Cohen. Then he returned to his hotel room. Hours later, he died of a heart attack in his sleep. He was found the next morning. The recording session for Taxi Driver had been his last act as a composer. Scorsese was devastated. The film opens with a dedication for Bernard Herrmann. When the Academy Award nominations were announced, Herrmann received a posthumous nomination for Best Original Score, one of only 4 Oscar nominations the film received. Neither Scorsese nor screenwriter Paul Schrader were nominated, showing how uncomfortable the film made voters. Fact 3.
Are you Charles Palantine, the candidate?
Yes, I am.
Robert De Niro's commitment to method acting is legendary, but his preparation for Travis Bickle took it to an extreme level. Despite having just won an Academy Award for The Godfather Part 2, De Niro spent 2 weeks working as a licensed New York City taxi driver. He didn't just observe, he got a real hack license and drove passengers around the city for hours. De Niro was filming Bernardo Bertolucci's 1900 in Italy simultaneously, so he'd finish shooting on a Friday in Rome, fly to New York, drive a taxi for days, then fly back to Rome to resume filming. This schedule went on for weeks. The craziest part? Despite being a fresh Oscar winner, De Niro was recognized exactly once during his time as a cabbie. That's how unfamiliar his face still was to the public in 1975. One passenger noticed him and asked if he was the actor. Everyone else was oblivious. Years later, Scorsese recalled that De Niro would drive at night to capture the atmosphere Travis Bickle would experience. He'd pick up prostitutes, criminals, and working people, absorbing their stories and mannerisms. When filming started, De Niro knew exactly how a taxi driver moved, talked, and thought. The performance wasn't acting, it was documentation. Travis Bickle felt real because De Niro had lived as him. Fact 4.
She appeared like an angel out of this filthy mess.
Taxi Driver was filmed during one of the most disgusting summers in New York City history. In 1975, the city was bankrupt, crime-ridden, and falling apart. Then came a heat wave and a sanitation workers' strike that left 58,000 tons of garbage rotting on the streets. For most productions, this would have been a nightmare. For Martin Scorsese, it was a gift. The temperature hit the mid-90s and stayed there for weeks. Garbage piled higher every day as the strike dragged on. Mountains of trash sat on sidewalks, overflowed from bins, and scattered across streets. Rats and flies swarmed everywhere. The stench was overwhelming. The entire city smelled like rot and decay. Scorsese barely had to dress his sets. The filth was real. Those seedy Times Square locations and grimy streets required no artificial touch-ups. New York was already living Travis Bickle's nightmare vision of the city. The heat made filming brutal for everyone. They shot at night, starting around 6 p.m. and working until 6 a.m. That meant the garbage had been baking in the sun all day, reaching peak stench right when cameras rolled. Cast members said the smell made some of them physically sick, but it worked. That authentic atmosphere of rot and despair became Travis Bickle's world. The city wasn't just a backdrop, it was a character, and it looked and smelled exactly like hell. Fact 5.
When that cigarette burns out, your time is up.
Jodie Foster was only 12 years old when she was cast as Iris, the child prostitute Travis Bickle tries to save. Despite being an experienced child actor with dozens of credits, her age created serious legal and ethical concerns about handling such dark material. Before production began, California's Child Welfare Department required Foster to undergo psychological testing. A psychiatrist evaluated whether she was mature enough to play a prostitute without being traumatized. The sessions lasted days, with doctors assessing her mental state and ability to separate fiction from reality. Foster passed the evaluation, but restrictions continued. A welfare worker supervised every one of her scenes. The worker reviewed daily rushes to ensure nothing inappropriate happened on set. Foster wasn't allowed on set when De Niro used profanity or during certain adult conversations. For explicit scenes, including shots where Iris appears in revealing clothing, Foster's 19-year-old sister Connie served as her body double. Any scene deemed too sexual or violent for a 12-year-old was filmed with Connie instead. Years later, Foster admitted how uncomfortable her character's treatment was. Scorsese didn't know how to direct certain scenes, so he relied on De Niro to deliver instructions. Foster credits De Niro with becoming a mentor who influenced her acting career. Fact 6. The most iconic line in Taxi Driver
Talking to me?
doesn't appear anywhere in Paul Schrader's original script. Robert De Niro improvised the mirror scene, and Schrader later admitted, "It's the best thing in the movie, and I didn't write it." The script simply indicated that Travis practices drawing his gun in front of a mirror and rehearses confrontational dialogue. There were no specific lines written. Scorsese and De Niro discussed the scene and decided De Niro would improvise whatever felt natural for the character. So where did "you talking to me" come from? According to Clarence Clemens, the saxophonist for Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band, De Niro saw Springsteen say the line on stage and adapted it for the film. However, Scorsese and De Niro have given conflicting accounts, so the exact origin remains mysterious. What's undeniable is the scene's impact. De Niro filmed multiple takes with different approaches and improvised lines. Some were aggressive, some playful, some darker. The version in the film captured Travis Bickle's mental state perfectly. A man rehearsing confrontations with imaginary enemies, practicing violence, losing his grip on reality. The American Film Institute ranked "You Talking to Me" as the 10th greatest movie quote of all time in 2005. It's been parodied and referenced in countless films and TV shows since. An improvised moment became one of cinema's most memorable scenes, proof of De Niro's genius. Fact 7.
What do you do? Hit the meter. Did I tell you to do that with the meter?
One of the most disturbing scenes in Taxi Driver features a hateful passenger who describes how he plans to murder his cheating wife. That passenger is played by Martin Scorsese himself, in what might be his most chilling performance as an actor. The role was originally supposed to be played by George Memoli, an actor who'd appeared in Mean Streets. But Memoli hurt his back working on another film and couldn't perform. With filming scheduled and no time to recast, Scorsese decided to play the part himself. Scorsese later admitted he was terrified. He'd never planned to act in such a prominent scene. De Niro became his acting coach, sitting in the front seat of the cab giving direction between takes and helping him find the character's tone. The scene works because of Scorsese's nervous energy and uncomfortable delivery. The passenger sits in darkness, a silhouette spouting violent thoughts. He forces Travis to look up at her apartment window while describing exactly how he'll kill her with a .44 Magnum. The tension is unbearable. Scorsese's performance adds another layer to the film's themes. The violence lurking inside ordinary people, the way way hatred festers in the dark. That Travis says nothing, just listens, shows how the city has desensitized him. It's one of the film's most powerful scenes, born from a last-minute injury and Scorsese stepping in. Fact 8.
Son of a bitch, you! I'll kill you! I'll kill you! I'll kill you!
The climactic shootout in Taxi Driver is one of the most violent scenes in 1970s cinema, and it almost earned the film an X rating, which would have killed it commercially. To save the movie, Scorsese made a creative decision that made the violence more disturbing. The original cut featured bright red blood exploding across walls and bodies during Travis's massacre of the pimps and criminals in the brothel. The Motion Picture Association of America watched it and threatened an X rating, which would have meant limited release and financial death. Scorsese had to make a choice: cut the violence or find another solution. He refused to cut anything, so he desaturated the color in the entire sequence. The blood shifted from bright red to dark brownish red, making it look less realistic and more stylized. The MPAA accepted the change and gave the film an R rating, but the solution created an unintended effect. The desaturated blood made the scene more unsettling. It feels like we're watching through Travis's deteriorating perception of reality. The muted colors add to the sense we're inside his fractured mind. The overhead tracking shot of the carnage, with bodies sprawled across the hallway, became one of the most famous shots in cinema history. It took 3 months to cut through the ceiling of the real apartment building just to get that 20-second shot. The result was worth it. Fact 9.
Into poverty, into unemployment, and inflation.
The mohawk haircut Travis Bickle sports before his assassination attempt of Senator Palantine wasn't in Paul Schrader's script. It came from a Vietnam veteran who explained its significance to Scorsese and De Niro over dinner. Victor Magnotta was a close friend of Scorsese's from NYU. They'd wanted to become priests together, but when the Vietnam War broke out, Magnotta joined the Special Forces instead. After returning, he became a stunt performer and appeared in small roles in Scorsese films, including Taxi Driver. During a dinner conversation about Magnotta's Vietnam experiences, De Niro asked about the Special Forces. Magnotta explained that in Saigon, before dangerous commando missions, soldiers shaved their heads into a mohawk. It signaled readiness to kill, that they'd crossed a psychological line. Scorsese and De Niro immediately recognized how perfect this was for Travis. The mohawk becomes Travis's transformation from lonely cab driver to would-be assassin. It's his way of telling the world he's crossed his own point of no return. Tragically, Magnotta died in 1987 while performing a stunt for the film The Squeeze, but his contribution to Taxi Driver, one of cinema's most iconic visual moments, lives on. Fact 10.
Wanna get busted? Fucking a bitch, be cool.
Harvey Keitel's portrayal of Sport, the manipulative pimp who controls Iris, is one of the film's most unsettling performances. To prepare for the role, Keitel did something most actors wouldn't dare. He went to Times Square and interviewed real pimps about their methods and psychology. Keitel had starred in Scorsese's Mean Streets and was originally offered a different role in Taxi Driver, but he was drawn to Sport despite the character having few scenes and minimal dialogue. He understood Sport needed to be charming and menacing, capable of manipulation while projecting relaxed confidence. So Keitel ventured into Greenwich Village and Times Square, approaching prostitutes and asking to speak with their pimps. Some agreed. He talked to them about recruitment, control, and how they viewed themselves and their business. The conversations were disturbing but informative. Keitel also improvised scenes with Jodie Foster during rehearsals, helping develop the uncomfortable dynamic between Sport and Iris. The slow dance scene where Sport seduces Iris back, telling her she's beautiful and needed, was largely improvised, shaped by Keitel's research into real pimp psychology. The performance is chilling because it's authentic. Sport isn't a cartoonish villain, he's a recognizable predator who uses affection as control. Keitel's commitment to understanding the real thing made the character terrifyingly believable. Fact 11. One of the most famous shots in Taxi Driver, the overhead tracking shot that glides over the blood-soaked aftermath of Travis's massacre, required 3 months of construction work for just 20 seconds of screen time. The shot was technically impossible until Scorsese's crew cut through a building ceiling. The final shootout takes place in a real apartment building. Scorsese wanted to end the sequence with the camera pulling back and rising above the carnage, showing the scope of the violence and Travis's isolation in the aftermath. It's a moment of visual poetry, the camera floating away as if detaching from the horror below. The problem? There was no way to get that shot with the camera equipment available in 1975. 1975. The hallways were too narrow for a crane, and there was no room to construct a rig inside the building, so the crew spent 3 months cutting through the ceiling of the apartment building, creating a path for the camera. They installed rails and mechanisms above the ceiling that allowed the camera to glide smoothly while filming the scene below. The construction was painstaking and expensive. When filming day arrived, they had one chance to get it right. The shot lasts about 20 seconds in the finished film. 3 months of work for 20 seconds, but those 20 seconds became one of the most analyzed shots in cinema history. Fact 12. 5 years after Taxi Driver was released, the film inspired a real-life assassination attempt that shocked the world and created one of the most disturbing legacies any movie has ever had. On March 30th, 1981, John Hinckley Jr. shot President Ronald Reagan, and he did it to impress Jodie Foster. Hinckley watched Taxi Driver at least 15 times in theaters. He became obsessed with the film, identifying with Travis Bickle's alienation and fixating on Foster's character Iris. He began dressing like Bickle, wearing an army jacket, drinking peach brandy, and adopted his mannerisms. When Foster enrolled at Yale University, Hinckley followed her there. He enrolled in a writing course his parents paid for, but never attended. Instead, he stalked Foster, leaving poems, love letters, and messages. He called her repeatedly. Foster turned the letters over to Yale officials and police. Failing to get Foster's attention, Hinckley decided to assassinate the president, just as Travis Bickle attempted to kill a candidate in the film. Before going to Washington, D.C., he wrote a letter to Foster explaining his plan, calling it an unprecedented demonstration of love that would make them like Romeo and Juliet. Hinckley shot Reagan and 3 others outside the Washington Hilton Hotel. Reagan survived but was wounded. Press Secretary James Brady was left permanently disabled. Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity. His defense team played Taxi Driver for the jury and argued the film influenced his psychotic break. Fact 13.
Well, yeah, I mean, I come and this is not so bad.
When Martin Scorsese learned that John Hinckley Jr. had been inspired by Taxi Driver to shoot President Reagan, he was devastated. The director briefly considered quitting filmmaking, believing his art had contributed to real-world violence. Scorsese had poured himself into Taxi Driver, creating what he believed was a cautionary tale about alienation and violence. Learning that someone had watched his film and been inspired to commit an assassination attempt shook him deeply. He questioned whether making films was worth the consequences. The negative perception surrounding Taxi Driver intensified after the shooting. Some critics and politicians called for the film to be banned or censored. Scorsese received criticism for allegedly glorifying violence, though most serious film scholars defended it as a psychological portrait rather than an endorsement of Travis Bickle. Ultimately, Scorsese continued making films, but the incident haunted him for years. He became more conscious of how audiences might interpret violence on screen. The incident also affected Jodie Foster, who found herself hounded by media despite being an innocent victim. The tragedy raised uncomfortable questions about art, responsibility, and mental illness that still resonate today. Was Taxi Driver responsible for inspiring Hinckley, or would his psychotic break have manifested differently without the film? These questions remain unanswerable, but forever changed how Scorsese and Foster viewed the movie. Fact 14.
Driver, hurry up, will you?
To capture the authentic atmosphere inside Travis Bickle's Taxi, Martin Scorsese and cinematographer Michael Chapman did something most directors wouldn't attempt. They crammed themselves onto the floor of the back seat while filming. The taxi interior scenes required intimate, claustrophobic shots that felt real. Scorsese wanted the camera inside the cab with Travis, but 1975 camera equipment was bulky and hard to maneuver in tight spaces. Traditional methods would have meant shooting on a soundstage with artificial lighting, which would have killed the realism. So Scorsese and Chapman hid in the actual taxi during real night driving. Chapman lay on the floor with his camera, framing shots through the front seat. Scorsese squeezed beside him, directing De Niro and monitoring footage. Sound technicians crammed into the trunk with their equipment. They drove through real New York streets at night, using only available light, neon signs, street lamps, headlights from other cars. The approach was influenced by French New Wave filmmaker Jean-Luc Godard and cinematographer Raoul Coutard, who pioneered guerrilla-style filmmaking techniques. The result is some of the most atmospheric cinematography in film history. You feel like you're in the taxi with Travis, experiencing his nocturnal world. The camera captures reflections, passing lights, and the chaos of 1970s New York, all because two men squeezed into uncomfortable positions for hours. Fact 15.
Do I look like a narc?
Jodie Foster's career-defining role as Iris almost went to someone else. Melanie Griffith, daughter of actress Tippi Hedren, was originally offered the part of the 12-year-old prostitute, but turned it down, likely under pressure from her family. Melanie Griffith was the same age as Foster and had already started acting. Her mother, Tippi Hedren, famous for Hitchcock's The Birds, was protective of her daughter's image and reportedly uncomfortable with the role. The character was a child sex worker, controversial material for a 12-year-old. After Griffith declined, Scorsese considered several other young actresses. Linda Blair, Bo Derek, and Carrie Fisher were discussed for the role. Marielle Hemingway auditioned and impressed Scorsese, but turned it down after her family pressured her to reject the material. Foster, who already had extensive acting experience, won the part after beating out over 200 other hopefuls in a lengthy audition process. Her maturity and professionalism during the psychological evaluation and throughout filming proved the right choice had been made. The role earned Foster her first Academy Award nomination and launched her into adult stardom. It's one of the most celebrated child performances in cinema history. Griffith went on to have a successful career of her own, but she likely looks back on Passing Up Taxi Driver as the one that got away. So there you have it, 15 dark secrets behind Taxi Driver. From Paul Schrader's suicidal breakdown to the presidential assassination it inspired, this masterpiece was soaked in real pain and tragedy long before Travis Bickle pulled his first trigger. If you learned something new, smash that like button and drop a comment about which fact blew your mind. Subscribe for more.